2 others also, who were criminals, were led away to be put to death with him. When they came to the place that is called the Skull, they crucified Jesus there with the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. Then Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they cast lots to divide his clothing, and the people stood by watching. But the leaders scoffed at him, saying, "He saved others. Let him save himself if he is the Messiah of God, his chosen one." The soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offering him sour wine and saying, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was also an inscription over him. It read, "This is the King of the Jews." The first word of Jesus from the cross speaks of forgiveness, which reminds us of his encounters with religious and political authorities that sentenced him to die on the cross. Crucifixion was a reminder to the populace that Rome would do what was necessary to maintain order. As is often true of public executions, a crowd gathered to watch. They shouted insults. They mocked him. Religious leaders, soldiers, even one of the men being crucified with him, taunted Jesus. As all of this is taking place, Jesus utters the first word from the cross. With the pain becoming increasingly unbearable and with life ebbing away, Jesus prays, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." The verb used here suggests that Jesus was continually praying these words, "Father, forgive them. Father, forgive them. Father, forgive them." Who did Jesus have in mind as he offered this prayer? The soldiers who nailed him to the cross and were trying to divide up his clothes? The religious leaders that collaborated with the Roman government to sentence him to death? The disciples who deserted him after his arrest? In speaking the words, "Father, forgive them," Jesus asks God to forgive the ignorance of people that support a system of domination that demeans and devalues people. In speaking the words, "Father, forgive them," Jesus asks God to forgive people who forget to forgive the people they encounter, even their enemies. With this word, forgiveness, the hatred of the cross is overcome once and for all. They had done nothing to deserve forgiveness. They had beaten Jesus. They had ridiculed him. They had him nailed to a cross. Yet, amidst the pain, the betrayal, the taunting, and the torture, Jesus prayed, "Father, forgive them." He forgave them when he could have cursed them. What can we do to forgive someone, especially when we feel like they don't deserve it?
One of the criminals, who were hanging there kept deriding him and saying, "Are you not the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other rebuked him, saying, "Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed have been condemned justly, for we are getting what we deserve for our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." He replied, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." Too many Good Friday sermons laud the trust of the criminal to the right of Jesus and chastise the rebellion of the criminal to the left of Jesus. This overly simplistic analysis of what happens on that hill of death outside the city of Jerusalem completely misses the struggle of both criminals as they die the worst kind of death imaginable. This scene is not as simple as either you say the right thing and you're in, or you say the wrong thing and you're out. If you are a person who thinks the question of salvation is as simple as either or, listen to this story told by Rob Bell. Several years ago, I heard a woman tell about the funeral of her daughter's friend, a high school student who was killed in a car accident. Her daughter was asked if the young man who had died was a Christian. She said that he told people he was an atheist. This person said to her, "So there's no hope then?" No hope? Is that the Christian message? No hope. Is that what Jesus offers the world? What if he had lived to be 16, and in that 16th year he came to believe what he was supposed to believe? Was God limited to that 3-year window? And if the message didn't get through to the young man in that time, well, that's just unfortunate. An excerpt from Rob Bell's Love Wins. The truth about us is that we are the criminal on the right and the criminal on the left. And because we are both the criminal on the right and the criminal on the left, there is hope for us. The promise of paradise is either for all of us or it is for none of us. The good news on this Good Friday is that in the death of Jesus, God has already decided for us, for all of us. What a relief. Jesus' promise of paradise? Is Jesus' promise of paradise only for people that say they believe in him? What does it mean for God to show us mercy when we doubt God's love and forgiveness? Meanwhile, standing near the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing beside her, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his own home. The poem, Enough. It is finished. Let us not waste words. Mother, your son. Son, your mother. Everything has changed. No longer look to the one on the cross. He has been killed. It is finished. There is nothing here to see. Look only to one another. God is dead. And hard as that is to hear, and everything religious stands against it, it is true. It is finished. It has to be. There is no divine magic, no theological sleight of hand, no clever smoke and mirrors of atonement or ransom or substitution. It is finished. And there is no easy through this. Love is dead. Only from that truth can the miracle be known. There was no line this man would not cross for us. His love was too great. It is finished. That's the miracle. It is done. We have seen the ultimate divine act of love. Go now in that love and be with each other. Mother, your son. Son, your mother.
For her on Calvary Hill. Nails in his hands, nails in his feet, a traitor kiss on his cheek. Pierced heart now broken in two, love crucified for me and for you. Eyes that won't see, ears that won't hear, lips that deny the friend once so dear. Slowly he turns and captures your eye, then passes on to Calvary to die. Behold the cross on which was hung life's very Lord, God's only Son, Mary's own babe, so bold and so still, helpless before her on Calvary Hill. Mary's own babe, so bold and so still.
Mary felt helpless. She watched them arrest her son, mock her son, beat her son, and now crucify her son. Jesus looked on his mother with love and compassion, even as his life was ending. He spoke to the beloved disciple, asking him to care for his mother. How can we reach out to people that are lost, hurting, depressed, with compassion?
When it was noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m. And about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried with a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" The Dogs of Good Friday, an excerpt from Accidental Saints, Finding God in All the Wrong People by Nadia Bolz-Weber. I couldn't see the dogs, but I could definitely hear them as they violently strained against the chain link fence, their barking tearing at my nerves. I steadied myself and quietly pulled a few bundles of purple tulips from my blue Honda while my intern, Alex, carefully unloaded House for All Sinners and Saints' large crucifix. We walked up a dark street with no sidewalks or street lamps toward the house where, a month earlier, 23-year-old Myra Perez had shot her own children, ages 4, 2, and 1, before turning the gun on herself. Only the 2-year-old girl survived. For this young mother, there had not been the hope of dawn, of the light that could come to scatter Good Friday's darkness. It was 2013, and we were continuing a practice started on our first Good Friday together, where after the liturgy, we gathered together at a site where an act of brutal violence had taken place in our city, and there we pray and lay down tulips that had been handed to those entering our Good Friday liturgy a couple of hours earlier and had then been laid at the cross as we sang, "Were you there when they crucified my Lord?" That is to say, we bring the holy things of the church onto the holy streets of the city, because on some level, the violence and despair of Good Friday is a constant human reality. Other parishioners parked on the dark street and joined Alex and me like a slow, quiet flash mob until we all stood near the ground, where blood had been spilled and hope had been absent. Eventually, there was a circle of 45 of us, all unnerved by the darkness and the snarling dogs. I was glad for our numbers. Had there been only a handful, I'd have been terrified to be in this place. I guess I was terrified anyway. With both hands, Alex held up the large crucifix, and we began. Earlier that evening, that same cross had been featured in our Good Friday procession at church, held by the cantor as he chanted. And after the cross was laid on the altar in repose, the air didn't move. We didn't move. And then the cantor began to sing Psalm 22, the words of a dying Christ. My God, why have you forsaken me? Then, when we sat down, the Passion of Jesus Christ from the Gospel of John was sung. The story of Jesus' trial, the thorns twisted into crowns, the flogging, the cries of crucify him and I am thirsty is different when it is sung. Some things just have to be sung to be heard fully. So 3 different voices sang the roles of the narrator, Jesus, and the crowd. 2 young women, neither likely to ever be in a church, sat side by side and sang the solemn reproaches, a Good Friday rite dating back to the 9th century. As Kate and Megan sang this ancient chant, it felt as though their voices were reaching through 2,000 years of Christian faith and bringing back into the room with them the full force of humanity's folly. We humans don't really know how to respond to the kind of grace and love shown us in Jesus Christ. Each reproach built in force upon the last, as did the congregation's sung response. And somehow, the truth of God and humanity, the truth of a gift and the rejection of a gift was made real in the vibrations of our singing. So that even the most cynical and non-religious among us, for those moments, could not keep from weeping for the ways in which we sometimes reject goodness, turn from love, and make choices that no one who loves us would ever make on our behalf. But it wasn't guilt we were feeling, at least not the church-made kind. I know what that feels like, and this was different. Because Good Friday is about us entering the difference between God and humanity and just touching it for a moment, touching the shimmering sadness of humanity's insistence that we can be our own gods, that we can be pure and all-powerful. Some may think that spirituality means attaining a disembodied, transcendent state somewhere up in the ether. But that's not where we find God. That's just where we try to be like God, and that's different. The Good Friday experience is one of feeling the pain of an entirely unfiltered reality. It is as if the atmosphere, the protective layer between us and the sun, has for a moment disappeared and we are being burned. I wonder if God is like the sun in that way and is the reason Moses could not look at God, because we need a protective barrier. We need God for light and warmth, but we also need some protection from God. Not because God is angry, as some would have us believe, but because we would cripple under God's truth unfiltered, which is why we do the Good Friday liturgy only once a year. None of us could bear it more often than once. Yet to never touch the truth of these things is to live only halfway. After we sat in our rows facing the altar and sang of the death of Jesus, we began the adoration of the cross, a time that closes the Good Friday liturgy when worshipers are invited to show their respect, to solemnly approach the altar, first just one person, then several, and finally 10 or so at a time. Many simply laid across the purple tulips they received for this purpose. Others touched it lovingly or kissed it, and some even unselfconsciously bowed on the ground in prayer, pulled down into the dirt like only the devastated can do. Then we drove to the junkyard dog menaced site, of a double murder-suicide, and for the second time that evening, our crucifix was placed into the center of those gathered, because Good Friday is not just a single event in history that we choose to remember a couple of days before Easter. On some level, although we can't handle the pain of acknowledging it, Good Friday happens every day. As people who believe in a God who suffered violence and affliction and responded in love, we had to believe, yes, God was even there. Then, with purple tulips in our hands and Alex still holding the cross, we sang. And suddenly, as if it were staged, the dogs stopped barking, as if their barks had also been pleadings for God's mercy, and they were grateful for us to take over for a few minutes. Then the moment we stopped praying, they took up their banner of protest and petition and resumed their cacophony. Without speaking, we left the barking dogs, walked away with the cross, and left the tulips there on that cold and bloody and holy ground. Then we headed home to await the dawn. That is all we could do, await the dawn. Amidst all of the pain, torture, and suffering, Jesus felt abandoned. He was afraid. He was in immense pain. He felt alone. When you encounter people that are feeling alone, how can you help them know that God has not forsaken them?
After this, when Jesus knew that all was now finished, he said, in order to fulfill the scripture, "I am thirsty." A jar full of sour wine was standing there, so they put a sponge full of the wine on a branch of hyssop and held it to his mouth. As his life ebbed away, Jesus asked for his most basic need to be met. I am thirsty. By asking for water, Jesus hoped his enemies would show him basic human dignity. Instead, they gave him sour wine. Who are the people in your life that are asking you to meet basic needs like thirst or hunger or friendship? What can you do to meet that need and bring healing?
When Jesus received the wine, he said, "It is finished." Then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. Years ago, Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel enchanted their fans with a song of a poor boy who went to New York on a dream and fell victim to the harsh life of the city. Penniless, with only strangers as friends, he spent his days laying low, seeking out the poor quarters where the ragged people go, looking for the places only they would know. It's easy to picture this young lad, dirty face and worn clothes, looking for work and finding none. He trudges the sidewalks, battles the cold, and dreams of going somewhere where the New York City winters aren't leading me home. He entertains thoughts of quitting, going home, giving up, something he never thought he would do. But just when he picks up the towel to throw it into the ring, he encounters a boxer. In the clearing stands a boxer and a fighter by his trade, and he carries his reminder of every blow that laid him till he cried out in his anger and in his shame, I am leaving, but the fighter still remains. The fighter remains. There's something magnetic in that phrase. It rings with the trueness. Those who can remain like the boxer are a rare breed. I don't mean necessarily win, I just mean remain. Stick to it until it is done. But unfortunately, very few of us do that. Our human tendency is to quit too soon. Our human tendency is to stop before we cross the finish line. Our inability to finish what we start is seen in the smallest of things: a partly mowed lawn, a half-read book, a letter begun but never completed, an abandoned diet, a car up on the blocks. Or it shows up in life's most painful areas: an abandoned child, a too early death of someone we love, a wrecked marriage. Am I touching some painful sores? Any chance I'm addressing someone who is considering giving up? If I am, I want to encourage you to remain. I want to encourage you to remember Jesus' determination on the cross. Jesus didn't quit. But don't think for 1 minute that he wasn't tempted. Watch him wince as he hears his disciples backbite and quarrel. Look at him weep as he sits at Lazarus' tomb, or hear him wail as he claws the ground of Gethsemane. Did he ever want to quit? You bet. That's why his words are so splendid. It is finished. Stop and listen. Can you imagine the cry from the cross? The sky is dark. The two other criminals are moaning. The jeering mouths are silent. Perhaps there is thunder. Perhaps there is weeping. Perhaps there is silence. Then Jesus draws in a deep breath, pushes his feet down on that Roman nail, and cries, "It is finished." What was finished? The separation between God and us was finished. The message of God's amazing love for humanity was finished. The sting of death was overcome. It is finished. It is finished. A cry of defeat? Hardly. Had his hands not been fastened down, I dare say that a triumphant fist would have punched the dark sky. No, this is no cry of despair. It is a cry of completion, a cry of victory, a cry of fulfillment, even a cry of relief. The fighter remained, and thank God that he did. Thank God that he endured. Thank God Jesus finished what he came to do.
Lav Damesh Hana Hayau Leaho
דת מרלן, הנה נתו משיחה, ברא דהלאה.
ענה ענה.
גוטפה!
עזבתני! מה שלום?
We know the resurrection is coming, yet today we remember the hard truth. Jesus died, truly died a very real and painful death. Out of love, God incarnate, Emmanuel, gave his life for our salvation. What does it mean that Jesus died for you and the sins of the world?
It was about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon, while the sun's light failed and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Then Jesus, crying out with a loud voice, said, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." Having said this, he breathed his last.